It could be a studio, it could be an arrangement, it could just be your pile of gear. It could be that place that everyone in your family says, why are you going back into your cave? Why don't you talk to the rest of us? And you say, you know, people, I enjoy my equipment because I set it up the way I like and it works for me every time. Keep your hands off it. It's my setup. Speaking of setups,
you're speaking to me, Dan.
Show me your setup. It's show me your setup. What kind of setup are we talking about? Well, we're talking about studio setups. And what makes a studio setup, Josh?
A room, a section of your living space that you put some thought into. You're thinking about sound quality. You might be thinking about video quality. It doesn't have to be professional, but you've put some thought into it.
And have you created a studio setup of your own?
You know I have.
I think you're in it now. Part of the fun thing about what we do is we get to learn a lot about microphones, headphones, video equipment, sometimes even lighting, and various tools and tricks to manipulate all of these elements in the digital realm. So we need a workstation, a place that we can come and hone our craft digitally. We call this a studio or a setup, and my setup is different from Josh's setup, and I'm sure you have a setup at home as well, and yours probably differs as well, but we have some things in common. We have aspects to take care of audio, video, and the lighting that the video requires. Josh, what kind of audio, video, and lighting equipment do you use in your studio setup?
I guess the thing I should mention first is the thing right in front of me that you can see right now. It's a large diaphragm condenser mic, and it's the MXL V67i.
You picked the MXL V67i because it has really good looks, but also because it is a sensitive, large diaphragm condenser microphone that has multiple pickup patterns, allowing you to switch to the one that you like. And you love the way it sounds, which is the bottom line with any microphone. You should love how you sound on the mic. And if you don't, you should get a different mic.
And you should always monitor yourself with headphones.
Yes, headphones are a good thing to use as well. Do you have a preferred pair?
Yeah, you suggested them. I was wearing some really nice sounding Sennheisers for audio editing work at our sister company, Marketing Messages. The kids were bleeding through into my work. So I asked you, what do you suggest? How can I isolate myself? You suggested these.
So the difference between the Sennheisers that you mentioned and the Audio-Technica ATM50s would be that the Sennheisers were an open back headphone and the Audio-Technica are a closed back, and the closed back covers the back. Therefore, sounds from outside the room aren't getting into the headphones as much because you've got this nice seal all the way around. And therefore, you're hearing what's coming through the headphones and not the space around you as much. So we have a microphone that's connected to your computer, but it's not just plugged into the computer. It must be plugged into something else. In fact, those headphones are plugged into something else as well. I think everything is plugged into a Motu.
The M2. It's a USB audio interface. It converts an analog signal, the microphone, into a digital signal that goes straight into the computer via a USB cable. It's a great way to work with a computer while recording. It eliminates a ground loop hum, electrostatic noise. In the old days, you could hear when their hard drive was churning.
Yes, you could hear computer performance like tweaking through the electrics and into the audio. So by taking the digital audio conversion or the DAC out of the computer and putting it into a box that plugs in by USB, you're eliminating that extra noise that happens from within the computer, the self noise of the computer. And therefore, your Motu M2 is doing the heavy lifting of converting the analog into digital. And on the way back, the digital into analog as it feeds your headphones or your speakers. So back to the Motu M2.
Oh, yes.
You probably picked this one because it has beautiful VU meters.
You got me. I mean, that's partially it. They are. You can see it on the screen here. I've got the product page pulled up, but really it was the physical control. There's a really big dial for speaker volume, and then there's a separate dial for headphone volume,
which is a nice feature.
I know that I'm often switching between speakers and headphones, and I didn't want to physically unplug anything. I didn't want to have to use a dual purpose dial for those. Maybe you have to push the dial in for headphones, push it again for speakers. So this gives me the two separate dials.
Josh is using a MXL V67i microphone that's plugged into a Motu M2 digital audio converter. That microphone of yours seems to be mounted on a shock mount, but it's also on a boom arm. What boom arm are you using?
The Heil PL2T seemed to be one of the best ones at the time, and it served me great. It served me, boy, since probably about 2008. And I have it mounted right into the desk. For years, I had it on a clamp, and that clamp that came with the boom arm just wasn't very solid. I don't know if it was you, Dan, who suggested I drill into my desk.
Oh, I don't know about that. Well, you decided that the standard clamp was inadequate for your needs, and therefore you got the Heil flush mount insert, which does require one to take the daunting and scary task of drilling a hole in one's desk. But boy, the end result is not only one fantastic fit, but also a very attractive looking desk. And when one's happy with one's workstation, one's happy with work. When I first started hearing about podcasts and getting engaged with podcasts, it was only something one listened to. But now it's also something you can watch, which is kind of fascinating. It changes the game in that suddenly you need to have a camera and lighting.
I think you can record everything in a video environment. You can release that full conversation as a full-length YouTube video. You can also take snippets of it and release shorter clips and then title those and hone in on exactly what that conversation was about and capture more people that want to hear about one particular segment that you recorded that aren't necessarily going to sit through a half hour to hour and a half podcast. So I think YouTube is fantastic for that. And I think people still enjoy that longer audio podcast format that you and I have listened to for years and years.
So there are pros and cons, but mostly just pros. I get a lot from just seeing the video, actually. Seeing somebody's studio setup in the background tells me why I'm hearing what I'm hearing in the background. Therefore, treating the space is sometimes less necessary, because if you can see there's a window and you hear the occasional bird, dog, or car go by, that's life. We can't all find an isolated environment in which to work. So if we see the background, it's not so bad to hear the background.
Yep. Just get that mic as close as you can where it's sounding good, and you'll eliminate a lot of that room noise.
Absolutely. In fact, that's a good point, because yesterday when we tested this recording, I was using a different microphone and it was picking up more of my room tone. So I picked this microphone today, which is not attractive, unfortunately. Josh has a nice gold, shiny with a light in it microphone. I've got this hunky little black thing with a misfitting pop filter, but it sounds good because I'm really close to it and I've got the gain turned up well. But also because it rejects the noise from around the rest of the room. It has a sweet spot. It is a cardioid pickup pattern, and it picks up right here and not so much out here and behind. Mm-hmm. So if all the noise that's being generated in my room, and there isn't very much, is behind this mic, then nobody has to hear the noise in the room. They just have to hear me as long as I get close. But if I get farther away, it's harder to hear me. So I have to be aware of where I'm sitting. Do you like to spend time tinkering with your audio video equipment, your computer workstation? We call a workstation a setup because it's a convenient term.
We were just talking about the video component, and I use a Nexigo N660p, 1080p, 60 frames per second webcam.
Sounds like a good recommendation for somebody looking to add a better camera angle to their existing laptop setup. For example.
Good point.
But how about the lighting, the lack of shadows?
Well, that's really why we do this, Dan. We are looking for softer light. We are looking for a flattering perspective from that camera. You and I know that a flattering perspective is not,
for example,
below you. It's not pointing up under your chin.
Are you saying that this isn't the best look for my webcast, my podcast?
So, Dan, I like my camera angle. I'm comfortable with it. What have you seen out there that you're uncomfortable with? Camera angles and laptops in particular.
I have yet to see anybody using a laptop webcam that looks decent for very long. They all look the same. That angle that I showed everyone a minute ago. The looking up the nose angle, as I like to call it. That's why you should get an external camera to attach to your device.
And with that laptop camera, you're getting a really close view up their nose.
You really are. You can see every hair. Aside from the camera angle and the camera itself, What about lighting? How does lighting play a factor in your setup? Because other people can fill in the gaps later mentally about, oh, I've noticed that the lighting is weird for me. This guy's using a light wand with a diffuser on it, and it smooths everything out for him. It also has adjustability. Maybe if I add extra light, not right in front of me like a ring light, but off to the side, that might actually improve my visual appearance, and I could move it around and try things.
Absolutely. And I have a light wand, and I guess it's really made for light painting or adding a little bit of color to your video or photography scene. The Savage RGB LED wand that I use for my key light is attached to a stand, which is mounted to the back of my desk. JUSMO, camera desk mount stand with ball head. And it just puts the light in a proper
It
position.
allows you to exactly articulate the location of the lamp.
I add an extra diffuser by throwing a single-use grocery store shopping bag over it. This LED light is not warm to the touch at all. It's a cheap way to soften the light. It fills in a lot of shadows when you have a diffusion panel over your light. And then you can see behind me, I've just got this white curtain. It's a room divider. A lot of white coming from the light and white behind me. There's a window to my left. There's a window to my right. And this just gives me a lot of natural light.
Josh, you don't always want to have to listen to everything in headphones. Do you use speakers as well?
I do. Yeah. For less critical listening, I do. Yep. So these are the Edifier R1280Ts. They're an inexpensive monitor. They don't have the largest drivers in the world.
I mean, an important consideration a lot of people don't think about when they're picking a monitor for their space is how big is your room? Because if you get monitors that are too big for the room, you're actually doing yourself a disservice. If you're in a small space, like say an average bedroom, you're going to want a smaller monitor.
And to free up some desk space and position the speakers at ear level, I have them mounted on Frameworks clamp-on studio monitor stands. They're the only type of stands that I've seen like this, kind of with a flat platform. I think it doubles as a laptop stand. You can angle it down, so you can use them for laptop or speakers.
And you can also use them to precisely adjust the speaker angle to aim it right at your ears if it's not already there. They look like they have a little rubber coating on them too to absorb some vibrations.
They do, yeah.
That's a good feature to have. I approve. I approve of all of your equipment. You may continue to use it all day long, every day and night.
That's an important approval.
And this has been a studio tour, a show me your setup, featuring Josh and his setup. Thanks, Josh, for showing us your setup.
Well, Dan, I appreciate you today guiding me through this tour of my setup, and I look forward to seeing yours.
Yes. Everyone's going to see my setup very soon. It's different. There's a lot more wood involved and less metal, but that's natural.
If you have any feedback on my setup or you'd like to show me your setup, please do go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/GoModPod and leave a comment. On Twitter, we're at GoModPod, and our website is GoModPod.com. And we help companies and organizations conceive and record and distribute their own branded podcasts.